Wars and crimes are everywhere now. And when you think about it, poverty, instability, fighting over resources, and corruption all have one thing in common. And that is they are all done for the main purpose of making more profits and money. So what the hell is wrong with money? Why is it causing so many wars and crimes and evil? Can't we just delete the whole goddamn concept of money? Like eliminate it from existence? Wouldn't that allow us all to live peacefully together at last, without this hierarchy separating the rich from the poor? How would the world function with no money? I bet that you've wondered about this at least once in your lifetime, and that's what we're gonna be exploring today. So stick around, and if you stay until the end, I'll be mentioning two realistic ways that we can fix the current financial system and still survive and thrive. Money is a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. So we use money for a bunch of reasons. As the definition suggests, money is first and foremost a medium of exchange. So we use it to buy and sell products and services from each other. This also includes paying and getting paid for our skills, time, and labor. Secondly, money is a store of value, letting us store the worth of our work so that we can use it in the future when needed. Not just that, we can even invest the money into profitable assets that generate even more money over time. Thirdly, money is a unit of account, letting us price things so that we can understand and compare how much they're worth. Obviously, without knowing the prices of things, we would have a hard time agreeing on their value. Money as a piece of paper holds no value. Its value is derived from its purchasing power. In other words, what you can buy with it. And we just mentioned why it's a must-have for individuals and communities to thrive. Nevertheless, money also brings a lot of issues to society, including poverty. People who lack financial resources often miss out on basic needs such as food, shelter, and healthcare. Wealth gaps. By design, money tends to accumulate in the hands of the few, making the rich richer while the poor get poorer. Criminal activities. Theft, fraud, scams, trafficking, and from bribes all the way to manipulating media and politics, money is a major drive and instrument of all these crimes. Mental problems. Constantly worrying about money is a leading cause for anxiety, stress, and depression, as society often measures a person's worth by their wealth. Devaluation of everything else. Short-term monetary gains overshadow long-term consequences, leading to damaged relationships, worker exploitation, and environmental harm, all in the name of making some more money faster. Instability. As I'll explain in a bit, money is founded on the idea of having trust in a mutual system. Once that trust is lost, everything breaks down. Millions of people could get affected overnight because of how fragile the monetary system is. Their life savings, which they have worked so hard for, could eventually lose its value due to forces outside of their control. This could happen due to inflation, recession, or currency collapse. Now let me just casually give you an example showing how broken money is. Let's say that you work so hard at a job for 40 years of your life, and you save whatever money you can throughout those years. Just saving, not investing. Even with an unrealistically low and stable inflation rate of only 0.7%, which is very low and unrealistic, your savings would still lose 25% of their purchasing power. To put it in layman's terms, it would be as if you have worked as a full-time unpaid slave for 10 years of your life. Now, doesn't this show how dumb and maybe even evil the current financial system is? So those were just a few real-life problems caused by the flawed concept of money in today's market economy. But what if money didn't exist? Well, that's not really a difficult question to answer, because we can just look back at history and see how things were before money was even a thing. As per many sources, before we started using money, we used to directly exchange goods and services for other goods and services. This was called barter. In the barter system, if you needed meat and had an excess of milk, and I needed milk and had an excess of meat, we too would directly exchange the meat and milk. And the same goes for all other goods and services. However, this system stood no chance once societies became more complex, due to many reasons, including what is referred to as the double coincidence of wants.
Very poor choice of words.
Which basically means that in order for two people to barter, they both need to have what the other wants. So if you have wood and want my wheat, but I don't want your wood, we won't trade. And you will have to find someone who's actively looking for wood to trade with, which makes it absolutely impractical at scale. Another limitation is that due to the lack of money, which as I mentioned acts as a unit of account, there's no real measure of value. which means we might not agree on how many liters of milk I should be getting for every kilogram of meat that I give. There's no real assessment of this. There are also many other logistical issues with bartering, such as how chaotic it could get to store wealth or to make long-distance trades. As a result of all these limitations, we started shifting towards more practical means for trading. First, instead of using random commodities, we started using more widely accepted items that had intrinsic value, such as grains, cattle, and salt. Now, obviously, this didn't solve most of the problems. We still had to travel with our actual products with us. So we eventually detached the value from the commodities themselves and turned to precious metals like gold, silver, and copper. We then gradually turned these into trusted and widely used coins, which made trading easier and much quicker. Now, although carrying a sack of gold is much easier than traveling with a herd of cows, it still isn't ideal. That's why people came up with the idea of promissory notes. These were paper notes that represented actual gold stored somewhere. This right here was the birth of the gold standard, which significantly made trading easier. Next, governments, through central banks, controlled the supply of money and backed its value by existing gold and silver, which meant that a country could have as much money as it could back by gold. Now you can see that I'm going through all this history quite quickly because it is not the main topic of the video and we will get into that in just a minute, but I wanted to mention all this so that you can get a better grasp on the situation. But anyways, we move. So in the first half of the last century, the world superpowers, first the United Kingdom and then the United States, moved away from the gold standard and stopped linking money to gold. Decades later, in 1971, under international pressure, Richard Nixon, President of the United States, informed the rest of the world of this matter. This was when fiat currencies took over, fiat being the Latin for let it be done. And since then, up until now, money is no longer tied to gold, and the only reason money has value is because governments say so. Then, as you're aware, digital banking took over, replacing physical cash with debit and credit cards, plus the ability to make online transfers, thereby transforming money from being just some ink on paper to numbers typed on a keyboard. And then came cryptocurrencies, which are decentralized digital money like Bitcoin, further transforming money from being numbers typed on a keyboard into codes in algorithms. Wait, where is this going? But anyways, that's where we are today. And given all those flaws in the monetary system that I mentioned earlier, people are exploring better alternatives, as they should. But as you just saw, history tells us that replacing money with other means of exchange, such as barter, doesn't quite solve our problems. Unless if we want to try again and see how well history will repeat itself, which, spoiler alert, history will repeat itself quite well. I mean, it's pretty wild how tough it is to replace money. Because remember what I said in the beginning? Money is a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. And in order to replace money, we must still come up with some means of doing those. But forget about replacing money. What about eliminating the entire process of exchanging value, meaning selling and buying? Can we even do that? Is that even possible? But before we completely obliterate money, let's make some together. So if you're an online business owner or an entrepreneur selling digital products and services, having great online video content is the best ROI investment that you can make for your business. It helps you reach new heights and achieve your business goals, either at gaining more awareness for your brand or generating more traffic and leads, or even boosting your sales and conversion. So if you're interested, I've been in this space for more than a decade. I know the ins and the outs, and especially of online video content. So make sure that you click the link at the top of the description box so that we can talk further face to face, and I'll be giving you a free audit of your already existing online content. Now let's get back to the main question. Can we actually remove money from the equation entirely? Well, to answer that, we must first understand that we use money as a means to keep track of debt. When you look into it, that's what money really does. So when you're buying something using money, you're basically telling the seller that you owe them something of the same value in return. So money acts as a statement of I owe you. And in order to delete money or remove it, we must first get rid of debt. Now, I'll be mentioning two main ways that we might be able to do that. The first way is through the gift economy, in which we gift goods and services based on generosity and relationship building rather than immediate or future rewards. This ties into a concept called reciprocal altruism. Now, that's a fancy game theory term, but altruism is basically the concern for the well-being of others irregardless of personal gain. And reciprocal altruism is when everyone does that. Everyone is giving without expecting anything in return. And here's a breakdown of how this system works. I receive a favor from you. I notice the favor and feel happy about it. From here, I could go either of two ways. The first way is that I feel obligated and want to do you a favor. Then I reciprocate and do you a favor in return. This makes you like what I did, which acts as a positive reinforcement, leading you to being more likely to do me favors in the future. The other way I could go is that I don't feel obligated or just don't want to do you a favor, which means that I don't reciprocate and don't do you a favor in return. You then noticed what I did, which is cheating basically, and you don't like it, obviously, leading you to being less likely to do me favors in the future. The gift economy has a major advantage and a major disadvantage. Its advantage is that it helps create stronger communities that are always looking out for each other. So instead of everyone working individually for their own benefit, people work together to help each other out, which builds a solid community. That's why different forms of this system have always been around throughout history in smaller communities and families. But when it comes to implementing it globally, that's when things get tricky. The main challenge of the gift economy, as you may have guessed, is that you can never be sure that everyone will be willing to reciprocate. There will always be people who exploit the system and only receive without giving. In fact, you might be one of the people who would take advantage of the system. You see, you've been watching this for so long and you haven't even subscribed yet. Come on, play fair, like and subscribe now. Anyways, the advocates of the gift economy tackle this concern by mentioning how anyone who is caught cheating by not carrying their weight would end up being ostracized, or basically kicked out of the community, or in John Wick terms, excommunicated. Now wait a minute, what would I end up doing if you excommunicate me from your gift economy community? I'll just have to become a criminal mastermind. Theft, fraud, scams, bribes, and all other criminal activities will follow. I'll personally make sure of that. So this brings us back to the starting point of seeking a better alternative than capitalism, which means that unless we all turn into angels, which I want, the gift economy alone would not solve our problems. Alright, so now we move to another alternative economic model, which is the universal basic needs, also known as the resource-based economy. In this model, everyone is provided by default with the basic human needs, such as food, shelter, and healthcare. At this point, people don't work for money. They contribute simply because they like what they do or they want to improve the system. The core idea of this model is the complete opposite of capitalism. You see, the resource-based economy is based on an abundance mindset, which believes that there are enough resources in the world for everyone. While the capitalist point of view fosters a scarcity mindset, which centers on the idea that resources are limited and everyone has to compete for them fiercely, which would obviously lead to more conflicts of interest and eventually more wars, as you can see. In a society that runs by this system, resource availability and consumption are tracked by sophisticated computer systems and AI that then allocate those resources as needed. This makes all goods and services freely and fairly available to everyone. It also negates the urge for making profit as the driving force of economy, and therefore eliminating the need for money altogether so that we can finally get rid of it. Supporters of the resource-based economy go as far as saying that it could pave the way for world peace by eliminating the same scarcity that is generating more and more territorial disputes and fighting over resources around the globe. It is also very likely to eliminate poverty and promote equality, which would then drastically decrease most criminal activities as a result. And apart from the well-being of people, this system also aims at preserving the environment. One way it does that is through cutting down on human-caused land, air, and water pollution. To be honest, a system like this might very well be able to eliminate most of the negative things about the monetary system that I mentioned earlier. However, it does raise big questions about the concepts of economic psychology, which I don't know much about either, but I asked AI, and it is basically referring to the fact that money is a big motivator for us. And in a world where everyone's needs are met, we might find it very difficult and lose the incentive to work hard or to take risks. I mean, I've been pointing out the shortcomings of capitalism like it's given out of style, but we can't deny that there are some parts of it that just work. For example, pursuing wealth has always been a strong human drive. We like to own stuff, to signal status, and to maintain control over resources. And in a world where everything is provided for free, what would drive people to work or to take on unpleasant jobs that need to be done? Well, the advocates of the resource-based economy counter that argument by mentioning that people would have shared goals to contribute towards. For example, everyone would be engaged in the common goals of addressing climate change, ending poverty, and curing diseases. Also, intrinsic motivation would replace financial incentives. So instead of working a job for survival, you would be free to contribute to society in ways that you're passionate about, which leads to more creativity, while those unpleasant jobs would be taken care of by automated systems and AI. So that answers that. But there's one general concern about all these economic models, and that is how exactly would we transition from our current economies to moneyless societies. All the laws and industries are already deeply tied to money. It's also quite unlikely for the existing beneficiaries, like governments, big corporations, and the super rich, to just let go of their wealth and power without resisting that change. And that's totally understandable. I mean, if you've worked so hard for years and finally managed to own some land, would you be willing to let go of it just like that? It's unlikely. Let's keep in mind that achieving peace should be the end goal, and resorting to force or violence in order to get there is counterproductive and won't help. As you can see, replacing or repairing the current monetary system comes with a lot of challenges and difficulties. But you know what? Challenges and difficulties are all we have now with the way things are. So we can either accept the difficulty of living within an absolutely broken financial reality, or we can face the difficulty of researching and developing a much needed alternative. Beside the two models that I mentioned here, there are some other economic models that don't remove money from the equation, but are increasingly being suggested by more and more people, saying they could replace capitalism or at least fix certain parts of it. These include multiple economic models that lean towards socialism, as well as the Islamic financial and economic system. And I won't be diving into any of those in this video, but let me know in the comments if you want me to cover them in the future. Finally, you can agree or disagree to the usability of those models or to the morality of the current market economy with capitalism and government intervention. You might be in love with that, and I respect it. But what I would like to say in the end is that the more we understand money, the more we realize that although it has many flaws, money isn't the root of all evil. We are. Thanks for subscribing.